Chapter 3. I probably drove home a little faster than I should have. The box sat in the passenger seat like an unopened Christmas present, silently daring me to tear into it. In my defense, it had been a while since I'd had a new toy to play with. I carried it inside, towed my shoes off, and dumped my keys in the bowl. No detour past Kurt's door this time. He probably wasn't even up yet. I went straight down the hall to my study, the box tucked under my arm like it might bolt for the door if I loosened my grip. "Act like an adult," I whispered to myself, placing the oversized box gently on my desk and practicing my composed breathing. And then I lost it. I attacked that packaging like a sugar-crazed toddler at a piñata, tearing the cardboard, yanking at the plastic wrap, crumpling foam and tape under my fingers. Every layer peeled back revealed more of the virtual reality system, and each time I lifted a flap, my heart jumped. There was probably a dignified way to unbox the most expensive piece of tech I'd ever bought, but this was not it. Finally, there it was, the full immersion virtual reality machine. It was enormous, more motorcycle helmet than headset, heavy and matte black, completely enclosing the head with no visor, no window, nothing to see out. A thick power cord dangled from the back like a lifeline. The weight was solid, almost ridiculous, too heavy to be wearing on your head, and yet I couldn't stop turning it in my hands, marveling at the molded contours. Beneath the embossed logo on the box was a single line: "Full Neural Immersion. You don't play it, you live it." I picked up the slim instruction booklet tucked beneath the headset. I unfolded it, expecting a novel's worth of diagrams, warnings, and legal jargon. The first few pages were filled with big, friendly paragraphs about creating a safe play space. It told me to clear the floor of any obstacles and move the coffee table, making sure pets and small children were evacuated from the area before I started. Then came the warnings: eye strain, dizziness, and a rare but terrifying side effect called temporal disorientation. There was even a stern note advising against operating heavy machinery or making life-altering decisions while wearing the rig. Some of the pages were just walls of tiny text, the kind of fine print written by a very paranoid lawyer. I didn't bother with most of it, but I did look at the pictures. One illustration showed a person tripping over a cat and flying headfirst into a TV, and another featured someone in a chair with a whole shelf's worth of items falling onto them. I flipped through the rest of the clutter. Finally, tucked right at the back of all those warnings and legal threats, I found a single page, stark and white. There were no funny diagrams here, no fine print, just 3 simple lines sitting in the center of the paper like a quiet command: connect, relax, calibrate. It felt less like a technical manual and more like a mantra, an invitation to let go of the world I knew. I stared at it. "That's it," I said aloud. 3 steps. This is either genius or a lawsuit waiting to happen. Despite my skepticism, I cleared space on the desk, plugged it in, and routed the power cable as best I could without turning my study into a snake pit. The rig recognized the power with a soft chime and a low hum that vibrated through the floorboards. It's alive. Holding the heavy helmet in my hands, the reality of the moment finally sunk in. This wasn't a flickering image on a screen or a polished trailer I'd watched online. It was tangible and solid, a physical weight brimming with a possibility that no advertisement could ever truly convey. I could feel it waiting, a doorway ready to be opened, the same portal Pert used to escape this house and vanish into a world of his own. Now it was mine. The excitement clawing at me was sharp and refused to be tamed. I hesitated only a second longer before sitting back in my office chair. The helmet felt impossibly heavy as I lifted it, its bulk dwarfing my head. I tilted it over my face, the interior cool and smooth against my skin, and slid it down until it settled into place.
The weight pressed evenly, snug and unyielding, like it was designed to swallow you whole. Fumbling slightly, I grabbed the chin strap and fastened it under my jaw, tugging it until it clicked firmly into place. The world outside simply vanished behind the helmet's thick casing. I lifted my hand, my fingers searching along the exterior of the helmet's smooth, heavy casing until they found the small, tactile activation button on the temple. I hesitated for a heartbeat, the silence inside the visor feeling thick and expectant. Quietly, almost reverently, I whispered, "Engage." Then I pressed the button. Somehow, the world went darker. Not like turning off a light, more like someone had taken reality and slid it gently out of reach. There was no weight pressing down on me anymore. I had no arms or legs, no body at all. Just a deep, velvety nothing stretching in every direction, soft and infinite, as if the universe had melted and left me floating inside its silence. A low vibration thrummed through me, not on my skin but inside my bones, deep and resonant, like the world itself was inhaling. Gravity reasserted itself, but seemed to tilt in place, not stronger or weaker, just rearranged, as if someone had taken the rules for up and down and shuffled them like cards. A voice followed, soft, calm, and close to my ear, without coming from any direction.
Warning: full spectrum sensory integration enabled. Extended sessions may cause sensory fatigue or emotional displacement. Please take regular breaks. The words slid through me. Initial continuous play limit for new users, 4 hours. System-enforced cooldown will follow. Noted, I said into the void, trying to sound braver than I felt. Initial neural interface detected. No existing user profiles found, creating primary user. A faint tingle ran across my scalp, down my neck, into my fingertips. Mapping neural feedback, aligning haptic field, binding device to current user. The hum rose, a gentle pressure behind my eyes, in my jaw, at the base of my spine. It wasn't painful, just total, like every nerve was being tuned one by one. Primary neural profile established. This device is now locked to this user. Please select an in-game identity tag. For a second, my mind went blank. Then I remembered an old familiar handle I'd used in the 90s. Big Tank 99, I said. There was the faintest pause, like the computer system was raising an eyebrow. Identity tag accepted. Welcome, Big Tank 99. The hum spiked. For a split second, the void tilted under me. My stomach dropped like I'd missed a step in the dark. No sense of standing or walking, just a sudden weightless lurch, as if I'd fallen through myself. And then I hit the world. I imagine if I had ever done acid, this would be what it felt like. Light exploded around me, brilliant, shifting, impossibly vivid. Textures brushed against my skin. Wind swept past, carrying sounds that didn't belong to anything. Distant laughter, faint metallic echoes, the subtle pulse of life vibrating through the ground beneath me. The world hadn't just appeared, it had hit me full force, and I was caught in its impossible, intoxicating magnitude. I was whole again. Gravity finally claimed me, anchoring me to the soil. A cold, sharp wind licked at my arms. I drew in a ragged breath, the damp, heavy air filling my lungs and tasting of wood smoke and rain. My fingers tingled with a new, strange electricity. I looked down. These were not the hands. They were broader, rougher, covered in the deep, dark suit of a life I hadn't lived, a stranger's history etched into the very grain of the skin. I flexed them, a slow, heavy curl of the fingers, and watched as they obeyed my command. They were mine now, mine to control.
The drizzle was persistent, a cool mist that clung to my face. When I raised a hand to wipe my cheek, the sensation was jarringly real, the drag of rough skin against a damp, solid jaw. Then came the rush of the village around me, the rich perfume of wet earth, the sting of wood smoke in my eyes, and beneath it all, a sharp metallic tang like hot iron. Then the roar of the village finally broke through the haze, crashing over me like a physical wave. "Get that brace in place! Shields to the gap! Move, move! Where are those carts? We needed them 10 minutes ago!" I turned in a slow, heavy circle, my feet grinding against the grit as I tried to make sense of the chaos. I was in the center of what might have been a pleasant village on any other day, a place of narrow streets, sturdy stone walls, and the steep, familiar angles of thatched roofs. But now the town was a sodden, frantic mess. The ground beneath me had been churned into a thick slurry of mud and gray slush, marked by 1,000 panicked footprints. Everywhere I looked, there was movement. Villagers, drenched and caked in filth, scrambled past me with crates of supplies or arms full of unsheathed swords and notched spears. Their faces were etched with a frantic, wide-eyed energy that made my new chest feel tight. A massive timber palisade surrounded the village, a jagged line of sharpened logs lined along its walkway, where figures in mismatched armor, shining breastplates over tattered tunics, battered helms, and leather guards. They were terrifyingly animated, shouting down to the streets and pointing toward the tree line with a vocal, desperate intensity. Whatever was happening, I hadn't just joined a game, I'd walked straight into a crisis. It didn't look like a game. These weren't cartoon avatars or glossy hero models. The people rushing past me had uneven noses and bad haircuts and lines around their eyes. One woman carrying a crate had dirt on her teeth when she shouted. Another man wore 2 different boots. A kid with a bandage on his head clung to someone's sleeve, eyes wide. It was all perfectly imperfect. I stood there for a beat too long, awestruck. Am I one of them? Do I help? How could I help? Can I change anything? "Oi!" a voice cut through the noise. I turned to see a tall man striding toward me. He had a bandage wrapped around his left arm stained red and a battered leather coat thrown over what might have been armor before someone attacked it with a hammer. He stopped right in front of me. I had to tilt my head back. The man was several inches taller than I, and he looked me intently in the eye, his gaze hard enough to chip stone. "Snap out of it," he said. His voice was rough, but it held a desperate sort of urgency. "We need all the hands we can get." I stared at him for a heartbeat, and that's when the world flickered. Just as I was starting to lose myself in the smell of the smoke and the sting of the rain, a clean white nameplate shimmered into existence above his head. It floated there, perfectly still, amidst the chaos. I blinked up at the floating letters, then back at the man who was waiting for me to move. "I, just got here," I said. "What should I be doing?" He huffed, half a laugh and half a sound of exhausted disbelief. "What shouldn't you be doing?" he shot back. He jabbed his thumb over his shoulder. "We've got a hold in the western wall that needs bodies holding shields. We've got people bleeding out in the tents who need bandages and hands that aren't shaking. The smithy's burning through iron faster than we can drag in, and our supply carts keep getting stuck in the mud." He stabbed a finger toward the main street, toward a blur of motion. "Help at the wall, help in the tents, help in the forge, help get crates where they need to go. Just pick one and get moving before we all die. Grateful for your thoughtful hesitation." Despair undercut the sarcasm. He wasn't issuing quest objectives, he was pleading. I turned again, forcing myself to really look. As my gaze settled on individuals, faint text popped into view over their heads, one by one. And then, as I first looked at Hob, and the see-through nameplate appeared over his head, I also saw a flash of color, a low glow lit on the ground right at his feet. A gentle green circle shimmered around his boots, like a laser pointing him out. I rubbed my eyes, but the circle held steady.
I stared at it for a moment, and then slowly shifted my gaze, leading it to Mara, the blacksmith's daughter. The green circle moved along with my gaze, like a steady-held spotlight, almost outlining exactly where I should look. "Oh," I said, "they're fantastically overworked." I scanned the other villagers, each tiny valve-shaped window offering a glimpse into their desperation. Hob, gate guard, exhausted. Hob was braced against a stack of crates, his sword resting point down in the mud, sweat plastering his hair to his forehead. Even from here, I could see the pallor under the grime. Mara, blacksmith's daughter, overworked. Mara staggered past with a crate almost as wide as she was, jaw clenched, hands shaking from effort. Donald, runner, injured, HP 48%. Donald stumbled by in the other direction, empty-handed, panting like he'd been sprinting for hours. Every nameplate was a little slice of someone's life, title, condition, a thin white bar for health, some full, some not. Donald doubled over, dropping to one knee with a ragged cough. Above his head, his health bar ticked down, 47%, 46%. A tiny change that somehow felt worse than if he'd just collapsed outright. "These people can get hurt," I whispered. Of course they could. It's a game. These characters take damage, they lose HPs, and they go down. That's how these things worked. But watching that representing Donald's HP points ticking down while he wheezed and muttered to himself made it feel less like damage and more like watching someone run out of time, one breath at a time. "They're at the gates," Donald rasped, staring past me with wild eyes. I turned. I could hear the distant thud of something heavy outside the village, hitting the wooden wall again and again, like a giant fist pounding on a door. Smoke curled across the rooftops, mixed with the drizzle, turning everything into a smear of gray and orange. Then a voice slid into my mind. It wasn't Wyric's, and it didn't belong to any of the frantic people around me. It was calm, digital, and utterly indifferent to the panic.
Tutorial scenario initialized, it announced. Objective, survive the siege. No further instruction will be provided. Every game I'd ever played had a scripted tutorial, a neat linear path to follow that gave you the basics and kept you from getting yourself destroyed in the first 5 minutes. But here, there was no glowing trail on the ground. There were no highlighted NPCs with golden exclamation marks hovering over their heads, and no neatly organized job lists waiting to be ticked off. This was the burning village Evan had talked about, the place where the system didn't help you, it just watched you. Every move I made, every hesitation, and every choice was being recorded and weighed, used to determine my character creation. I stared into the smoke, the weight of my new limbs feeling heavier than ever. I felt a bit miffed that the game hadn't even given me a proper quest or a single hint. I was almost paralyzed by the sheer number of options. Do I help the villagers? Do I run for the wall? Do I find a weapon? I whispered to myself, the words barely audible over the shouting. "That's it? Just go? No hand-holding?" There was no reply. I let out a shaky breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Somewhere behind me, someone screamed. From one of the houses, I heard a young boy sobbing, thin, broken little sounds that cut straight through the noise and straight into me. It slammed into the part of me that was hardwired as a parent, that overprotective reflex that wakes up at the slightest child's cry. For a moment, all I could see was Kurt at that age, scared and trying not to show it. The sheer realness of it swelled up inside me, empathy, panic, a fierce need to help people who didn't even exist. The immersion wasn't just about pretty graphics or fancy motion tracking. It wrapped around something raw and human, fear, urgency, the instinct to help, or to hide, or to run. For the first time in a long time, standing there in the middle of that rain-slicked chaos, with villagers sprinting past and a wall about to break, I understood why Kurt never wanted to log out. The world didn't just look real, it felt like a second life waiting to be lived, a place where what you chose to do mattered.
All right then, I forced myself to remember it was still a game, and that somewhere under all this panic, the system was watching, waiting to slot me into a role. As I turned, my eyes caught on a small figure struggling along a muddy track, dragging a basket almost as big as he was towards the mountain, towards the village mine. If this world wanted to test me, fine. I was going to help, and I would start with this boy.